I'm Randy Robinson. It's good to be back. I was off last week, but I had some good interviews that lined up for you. I hope you enjoyed them. If you asked me a question and I ignored you, please accept my apologies. I was roaming the hills of southern Utah, which is beautiful. Highly recommend that. But we are back. We've had our 4th of July, which was about as interesting as 2020 has been. It's been an interesting time. And you know, I think this is really the time where amidst the confusion, amidst the negativity, amidst the angst and the tension, and the COVID, that we really need to press into truth. And I am convinced beyond anything that the truth of the gospel is the only thing that's going to get us through. What does that look like? What does the gospel look like in the lives of people? All people. Anyone, because the gospel, God so loved the world applies to all of us. Well, I have a wonderful guest here to show you what it looks like. Her name is Kasey Waller, and she is just, well, you just need to hear from her because I think you're going to be inspired today. Please share this. If you haven't subscribed already or followed, depending on where you're watching, click on subscribe or follow so you'll get notifications of all the great interviews. Kasey, how are you doing today? It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Hey, Randy, thank you. I appreciate it. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, I like to hold up positive examples for people because it's inspirational and it's encouraging. And you have just one of those stories of overcoming, of facing, obstacles that unfortunately keep a lot of people down their entire lives, but you refuse to. So take us back to where you want to take us and just walk us through your journey, and that way we can even better appreciate the success that you live in now.
Yes, absolutely. Well, as you mentioned, my name is Kasey Waller, and I'm originally from Chicago. And I was raised in a small little suburb right outside of Chicago called Joliet, Illinois. And that's pretty much where I have most of my memories. When I was about 8.5 or so, my mom had passed away. She had an aneurysm, a brain aneurysm. So to experience that type of tragic at a young age, I definitely could say that I know that God is real because of how I was able to make it through those times, especially being young. We're real big on comparison. I'm seeing all my friends, with their moms and with their parents. And at that time, my father was not in my life as well. So here I am, a young girl without her mother, without her father. And thank God for my grandparents because they took my brother and myself in, and I pretty much had been living with them all my life until I actually graduated. But before my mom died, I actually went through a lot and experienced a lot. And I think that's where, even though some people, when they speak to me, they say that I speak beyond my years. And I think it has a lot to do with my experience and what I've been through. For example, being able to witness domestic violence and homelessness and all that early on, it really, helped me change the lens on how I view the world at that time, even as a young girl. So while everyone, far as kids my age, were about dolls and, toys and things, I got a much greater reality going on where that's not even important right now. We're trying to, live. And, at that time, I also stayed in shelters because we had a story that I don't mind sharing is one of my mother's, I call him estranged because to me he was crazy. Boyfriends my mother was done, she ended the relationship, and I remember we ended up moving and, we kind of kept it a secret on where we were, but somehow he ended up finding out. And I would never remember, I went to the bathroom, it was really late at night, can't tell what time it was, but I know that it was at least between 1 to 3 in the morning. And I go into the restroom and a brick comes through. And I don't even remember anything in that moment besides me jetting out. And by that time, my mother had met me in the hallway. So from there, we just smelled fire. And now our whole building is on fire. So my brother, my mom and myself, we ended up leaving, left everything. I didn't have any shoes on. Same thing, like we had no time to get nothing because we just was in fear. So we really wasn't thinking about nothing else. So we just jetted. And that was one time where I remember I lost completely everything that I ever owned. Hence why today, material things is really not that important to me because you experience something like that, it's like, who cares? We're alive, we have each other. So all of that shaped my perspective on how I view life today. And that's just a brief story about it.
Yeah. Losing your mother at such a young age and not having I don't know what happened to your father. He obviously was not in the picture if you're having boyfriends in and out. What happened to you after that? Because that's very young to lose the parent that's raising you.
Yes. So after my mother went into the hospital, so when we moved to Joliet, all of our family still stayed in Chicago. So every weekend, I was always with one of my best cousins. She was like a sister cousin. So we were always going out there. And this particular weekend, it was winter break. And so I left and everything was fine. And next thing you know, my aunt is coming, to take me back home, but we're not going home. I'm seeing a different route. And so I'm trying to process it as a young child and realize, well, this don't look like the way to go home. And sure enough, we ended up going to the hospital. And I remember one of my other aunts asking my other aunt, well, just follow the H and we'll know where to go. And I'm sitting here listening to this, trying to understand as a child, like, where are we going? An H hospital. So I'm just like, just kind of stuck right there. And sure enough, when we get inside the hospital, my aunt asked the receptionist to let her know. She basically was telling her that we're here visitors for Karen Clark. And that's when my heart dropped because I'm like, that's my mom. Mm. And then I'm wondering, visitors, I just saw my mom 2 days ago while we're here. And soon as we get in the elevator, I started crying because I knew whatever it wasn't right. Mm-hmm. And so that's when it hit me. I was away from my mom and she was fine. And I come back, she's in the hospital. And at that time she was in a coma. And I remember just sitting there, just looking at her and, just really praying and wishing that she would wake up. And I wasn't trying to think negative. I'm just like, my mom, she's going to wake up. She's going to wake up. My brother, on the other hand, who was 16, he took it much worse than me. Very, very worse than myself. But in that time, when it was probably about maybe a month, she was on the breathing machine. And they came in and they basically was telling my grandmother, myself. By this time, my aunt had found my father. And so he ended up coming to the hospital. So I was very happy because I hadn't saw my father probably in like 4 years. So I was very excited, but at the same time sad. They was letting us know, hey, we're going to have to pull the plug because she's not breathing on her own. And that's when it hit me and I accepted death at that moment.
What happened to you after then? Just not just emotionally, but physically, where'd you live? Where were you raised?
So after that, well, prior to, we had already went with my grandmother and grandfather and was spending the nights there because we wasn't going home alone. Right. So we ended up just staying with my grandmother and grandfather till then.
Now, did they raise you in church? Because you mentioned praying, so that was already something in your life. Or your mother raised you in church? Your grandparents raised you in church?
Surprisingly, no. But my mother, I witnessed her a lot of times. She stayed praying. She stayed studying the Bible. And I always saw that she never pressed it upon me. She didn't even teach me what to believe. She didn't teach me anything. She had her own personal relationship. And I just remember her having these long bath tubs, like baths. And I would see her go take her Bible in there. And she asked me, do you need anything? Because I'm going in here and I don't want y'all bothering me. And I remember that. Even though she never spoke to me about any religion, she never did any of that, which was so amazing when I think about it. She never shared her relationship with me. I just saw her.
Yeah. Well, and and actions speak louder than words, right? I mean, I do believe in sharing verbally, but you got to live it. When did faith become your own?
I always felt his presence.
Hmm.
I didn't understand it 100%, but I knew that something was going on. For example, I remember one time, and he really dealt with me by comforting. The spirit of comfort was the most important thing for me in that time of my life. And so I would never forget, because we grew up very poor. And so whenever my brother and I needed different things, we would have to take turns. So I remember this one particular time that I really had wanted something, and it was my brother's turn. So I was really sad. And I just kept it to myself because I really wasn't a big complainer. But deep down, I still have emotions and feelings too, but I didn't complain. And I just remember going into the car one day, and my grandmother and grandfather, they always listen to the Dusty's channel. Like, you not going to get in their car and listen to any other type of music besides the Dusties, or they call the old school. And
What? Wait,
so,
wait, hang on. Pardon my ignorance, but what is that?
more like Aretha
Oh,
Franklin,
okay.
and uh,
So Motown.
yeah, Motown. All of the throwbacks, as we call
Okay.
them.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, but yeah, so that's all they pretty much listened to, even when we were in the car. And at this particular time, I had a very favorite song by Monica called "Before You Walk Out My Life." It's an R&B song. So we gets in a car. We're probably about 5 minutes driving. Mind you, I'm sad, and I remember my favorite song playing on the radio. And me knowing that my grandmother and them don't listen to that, I'm wondering, like, wait a minute, how is this playing? So I kind of sit up, look at the radio station. I'm like, no, this is their radio station. So I verbally asked my grandpa, I said, Grandpa, did you turn the radio station? He was like, no. I said, Grandma, did you turn the radio station? She was like, no. So I'm really sitting there like, how did my favorite song get on this station? And it hit me years later when I really realized that, because music cheered me up and it was my favorite song, and I really felt like it was the spirit of God comforting me in that moment.
That's awesome. So, growing up poor and losing your mother at such a young age, um, typically, unfortunately, we would say in this country, that's a recipe for uh, a life of hardship, failure, perhaps. Um, Certainly not a reason for optimism. Where were you as you went through high school and graduated and started, becoming a young woman, having to fend for yourself? What was your mindset through that?
So at that point, I became even more determined to be better. And when I ended up going to, I continued with the school that I was going to. I was involved in all the sports. That really kept me focused and kept me going, along with some amazing teachers that I have still to this day. And when I was 16, I actually became a teenage parent.
Mm.
I had my eldest daughter when I was a sophomore going into my junior year. So that intensified my determination even more, because I was like, I really have to make it for her, because I didn't want her to experience what I did. And I just ended up, my mindset just changed so drastically. And I just became focused on just making sure I was planning for my life as much as I could, instead of just going day by day, which is something that I noticed in my family and those around me. I just started to just plan.
All right, so I want you to tell people where you're at now, where you're at today, from a business standpoint, from a somewhat financial, just to give them an idea of your success, and then I want to backtrack and go from being a high school mother, from a very difficult background, um, and kind of connect the dots. How do you get from a place where a place of difficult. I mean, the odds are stacked against you. Let's just be honest.
Yeah.
But you're successful. But tell us right now what you do today, and just go ahead and brag. I know you don't want to do it, but I'm going to ask you to. Go ahead and brag a little bit about the success you've had, because I think it's important for people to see that you can overcome great, great odds, because most people don't even have the odds stacked against them the way that you did.
Yeah. So right now, currently, we have an organization called Mesa Life Resource Center where we provide life skill classes, whether it's anger management, domestic violence, parenting, just basic counseling as well, one-on-one counseling. And we have been very successful for about 5 years. We've been operating in this vein where we've been able to help people by sharing life skills with them, because a lot of the clientele that we get, they were experiencing similar or worse or almost similar things that I did, and as well as some of my partners. So we've been able to take the learning principles and the experience to share with our clients to help them overcome that's having difficulty as well. So the very thing that, in a sense, I wish that I had when I was going through, instead of having to fail and try my way through and, go through that process versus having wise counsel, I really believe that I would have not went through certain things, but I accepted because it was my journey. But you can still use wisdom. So, but taking those same experiences and helping other people who's in that maze of life, stuck at a dead end, not knowing what to do, feeling pressed, depressed, just any emotion you can think of that's considered negative that keeps people stuck in that mental state, which that's where everything is birthed out of.
Yeah, I can't even express how important the work you're doing is today. I mean, well, okay, we'll get there in a second. But so fill in that gap between trying to finish high school, being determined, having a child at 16, and now being in a place where you turn around and helping others and being successful at that. How did you make it through? How did you get there? I mean, that's an incredible thing that you've done. And so I just want to give people an idea of how you did that.
So when I had my daughter at 16, I ended up going into an early program because I had enough credits. So I was able to get out of school at noon. So during the time I was pregnant, instead of quitting school, I ended up becoming homebound, which they allowed me to pick up my work on Mondays and turn in my work on Fridays. So my grandmother would help and do those things for me so I could still, finish school. And so I was able to also use that experience and share with some people in my classroom, because there were some other teenage mothers who after a while ended up quitting, and some of my teachers was like, hey, are you okay with reaching out to such and such so that maybe you can share how you're doing it? So I was already open to talk to other peers to share, hey, you don't have to quit. I know that it's hard because when you in your third trimester and the Braxton Hicks and things, like it is very hard and uncomfortable. But for me, I asked questions. I knew that there was a way that I could still be home where I could be, lay down and be comfortable, but in the times that I would get the strength to do my work. And sure enough, I spoke to my counselor and she said, well, there is a program called Homebound and you can do that. And then you will have, after the baby is born, you will have 90 days to come back. If not, we will drop you. So I thought that was the perfect thing, because I'm like, man, that's enough time for me to, do what I need to do and come back. Sure enough, I ended up coming back, ended up still having great grades, honor roll student, and I ended up graduating honor roll student. And from there, while I was working at 17, I actually got a job at Hollywood Video. And I started there part-time. And I'll never forget my manager. She was so amazing. She ended up one day asking if I can come in early and stay later because something was going on with one of the managers, and so they was going to have another manager come on. And so I said, okay, not a problem. So I did that, And so because it was my store, I felt like I needed to do the very things that I saw my managers do, because I knew that this new manager wasn't going to go over and beyond. It wasn't their store. They was just coming to do the logistics of closing, right? So I took it upon myself to do the closing that I knew they would do. And the very next day, my manager called. She said, Kasey, can you come in? I need to talk to you. So I'm like, is it good or bad? And she was like, it's not bad. Just can you come in? And she actually asked me to come in about 30 minutes earlier than my shift. So I did. And she said, who cleaned the store and who got everything together last night? And I was like, well, I did. And she was like, I want to make you manager when you turn 18, which I was about maybe 7, 8 months. She said, but I want to start training with you now. And she was going to give me a $2 pay raise at that time. And I was going to get more hours because I was working part-time. So that was the first level of me understanding leadership on that level in the working place at a young age, because I was 17. And so from there, I pretty much ran the store for about a year, and she continued to give me increases in pay. And then I'll never forget, one of my coworkers who was barely there, she came in and said, hey, Kasey, I'm about to leave from my job and they're looking for an orthodontic assistant. And I'm like, ortho who? And she said, an orthodontic assistant, we help the doctors, with clients that has braces. So I was like, yeah, sure. That sounded better than working at Hollywood Video, even though, I was thankful, but I'm like, I'm in. So she ended up bringing the application, filled that out, went on the interview, ended up getting a job. And that's where I actually see a greater I guess, level of my life because of the hours, the profession, and the work. Yeah. And so from there, I would say one pivotal moment was the doctor I actually worked for. He was a believer. He was a believer of Christ, and he used his dentistry as his ministry. So he would come in and share different stories of the gospel to always bring home a point to us. And most of the time, when you go to places, in the meetings, the morning huddles, they want to talk about money and stuff. Every once in a while, he may go over numbers, but most of the time he has something profound to share with us. And he was one of the most impactful people that I met that took me to another place in my faith. And it just went from there. And his name was Dr. Chung.
Okay, I love it. Two biblical principles you just illustrated. One, the orthodontist using his vocation as ministry. I mean, that's people, I hear, I'm in full-time ministry, and when people say to me, oh, I wish I could be in full-time ministry, I say, you are. You are right where you're at. And the impact that he had on you in the orthodontist office,
Yes.
Beautiful, just illustrating biblical principles. The other one is, when we're faithful in the little things, God gives us more. Cleaning a Hollywood Video, and for any of you guys under about 25, that's a place where before Netflix, where you used to go rent movies and bring them home. We used to do that. But a job that is not a profession, typically it's not a lifelong thing unless you own them. It's an entry-level job, but you went above and beyond in your entry-level job, and that opened the door to greater things. And I think it's right out of Scripture, but it's so important that people hear that wherever you're at, because if you feel like my job's not important, or it's not that big a deal, or it's not what I want, God says be faithful in those little things, because that's what will advance you. And that's what Kasey did. It's exactly what she did. Okay, so through all of this, you also have a degree in psychology, and you went on to work at at Bank of America for a while before starting the Maze of Life Centers, yes?
Yes, absolutely. That's where I learned to really become a business professional, because the amount of training that they pay for, that's why I tell people, don't despise small beginnings. Don't despise if you do desire to have your own, because you're going to learn what you need on the way. And one of the things that I can say that I took from Bank of America, being a small business consultant, was being able to learn business and teach it to my clients so that they can, grow their companies. Because our direct target was small businesses. So these are people who just now starting or haven't been in very long. So they're in their infantry. So I was able to learn so many strategies. And with the training that they provided, they were paying thousands upon thousands for our training. So that very same training that I did not have to pay for, I received and utilized and leveraged, for my own business. So you just have to do your process.
Yeah, and take advantage of what's available to you. Okay, so now you and your partners are dedicated to one thing it said on the sheet, to break the curse of poverty. What does that
Yes.
look like to you?
So because of my background in understanding that a lot of when you're in a situation where there's no lack, that's where people can lose hope the most. Excuse me. Lose hope the most. And one of the things that I believe, when people begin to lose hope, they don't see any greater possibilities. All they believe is what they feel and what they see from their experiences and from, their environment. So what we want to do is come and be the one to wave the flag to say, hey, there are possibilities. And, we're going to help you to identify what is in you, because all of us have something in us, but a lot of people, lack that self-awareness, to be able to look at self, evaluate self, which is an important principle, because how will you know what to change or what to improve, or what to stop doing if we don't evaluate self? So that is our goal. We help people to go on a self inner journey so that they can be able to discover all what's there, even understanding the trauma and the pain, because some people know it's there, but they don't understand it.
Yeah.
So we want to not only break the curse of poverty financially, but just also spiritually, because there's a lot of people that are bankrupt, spiritually dry bones, and just pretty hopeless about every situation in their life, every aspect. So we want to be the one to say, hey, you matter, there's purpose within you. Let's go on this journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. You in a lot of ways have what society, especially right now, would tell us are three strikes. You grew up poor, you're a woman in business, you're African American, black, whatever you prefer. Right now, we're hearing a messaging that America is dead set against you and you can't succeed. What do you say?
I say that that's a lie. And I say that no one can determine what your life will be besides you. It's a personal thing. It doesn't matter what odds are against you. It really doesn't, because just like any stumbling block, you can step over it, you can go around it, you can break it, you can blow it up, whatever. If you really want it, you're going to find a way to overcome it. And that's the attitude that I submit to people who want to use history, past history, and bring it into the forefront and use it as a clutch to say, well, this is why I'm not successful. And for me, being one that have my own personal experiences, I know that it was all up to me. It was all up to me. And when I began to really tap into my spirituality and build my relationship with God, it was even more powerful. So I love to share with people. Imagine what you're doing on your own in your own strength, and you feel like you're making progress. Imagine how far you can get with God,
Yep, and I think that's 100% the right attitude. At the same time, I also know that we can do better as a nation,
Yes.
as a church. Is there anything that stands out to you right now that could be improved so that someone who is facing very real odds, to me, it's not fair if you, as a poor black girl, if the hurdles in your life are twice as high as the hurdles in mine as a middle class white young man, that's not fair. Is there anything you see that we could change quickly to make those hurdles not so disproportionately imbalanced. In other words, not a lot more difficult for someone like you than for someone like me.
Right. I would say the main thing that I look at and I see of drastic change immediately is resources.
Mm.
Being able to have the things you need to be successful, rather it's capital, rather if it's more information, more knowledge, it's really resources, because resources will always lead you to the finances. It's not just always money, because one thing that I do believe, that if a person does not have the skill set or do not have the mindset to deal with money, you can give them all the money in the world, are they going to still do right by it? So I'm real big on not just only asking or seeking for the financial resource, but also the information, the knowledge, so that when you have the money, you can be wise with it and see results.
Mm.
So that's pretty much what my stance is just resources, being able to have different things that we need to be successful.
Yep.
And it's information.
Yep. mazeoflifecenter.com is the website here. There it is. What if someone wants to support what you're doing, and because that to me is an easy way to get rid of that imbalance and hurdles, is to support someone who's doing exactly what you're doing. Is there a way for people to get involved or to help with what you're doing?
Yes, absolutely. We're always looking for people who have a teaching heart, who may want to, help people within their region. They can reach out and learn how they can be a franchise owner and duplicate the very thing that we're doing. And we're always looking for people who want to donate to us to provide scholarships for people who may come want help, but can't afford it. So, any way that a person wants to give, we're open to that. But that's pretty much what we're always looking for, people who love to help others, who want to pour into others.
And that's at mazeoflifecenter.com. Mazeoflifecenter.com. I'll put it in the notes here. Kasey, I love your attitude. I love your message. I love the hope that you bring. And I just thank you for sharing. Is there any last word, anything that you just want people to hear today that we just need to hear?
Yes, one thing I want to share is that in these difficult times, with so many things that are put before us that I feel is causing division, let's not fall into those traps, because especially if we say that we have the love of Jesus, how could we if we're treating our neighbors the way that we see it being portrayed today? So one of the things I say is, let's all just try that much harder to love each other.
Yeah.
And I think that's the start.
Yep.
And put aside, what we think and what we feel, because at the end of the day, that's just what it is. It's what we think or what we feel. Mm-hmm. And it's all based on, how we've been raised, what we experienced. So, if we all communicate and love and talk to each other, we actually will learn more from each other, which will bring more understanding. And when there's understanding, hey, you can get through anything.
Mm-hmm. That's so true. So true. I took the last week off, a week off of news, and you know what I realized? When I turn on the TV, I hear lies, 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 and lies. Ladies and gentlemen, you just heard truth right there from Kasey Waller. Kasey, thank you so much. What a beautiful thing that you're doing, a beautiful testimony. This is the hope. You are the hope for America. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank all you guys for hanging out and watching. Please do share this. This is reality. This is truth. This is hope. This is love. This is faith. This is the hallmark of the church. So we just need to lift up Kasey and those working and striving in the ways that she's doing. And man, I'm just inspired. I hope you'll share this if you haven't already. And I just encourage you to follow and come back. I've got some really great interviews lined up this week, people. So let's tap into some truth here. We really need it in our world today. Thanks again for hanging out. Appreciate all you guys. We'll see you again right here on Life Today Live.
Make no mistake about this. When you come to God, you must change your ways. And make no mistake about it, friends. You may be wicked when you come to God. You may be unworthy of the healing because of your sins. But when you come to Him, you must believe Him and repent of your sins and become one of His children.